There is a city underneath Paris. It runs along the same rough layout as the one above it. Darker, quieter, and instead of 10 million living people, it holds 6 million dead ones. 240 kilometers of tunnels run beneath the cafes and the metro and the morning commute. The bones inside them have been there since before the French Revolution ended. The skulls are stacked in geometric patterns. Someone arranged them carefully. Someone thought about how it should look. Most of the people drinking coffee above them have no idea any of it exists, and the ones who do know tend to go looking. Some of them come back with stories. Some of them get lost down there for days. One group built a cinema in the dark and left a note telling whoever found it not to look for them. This is the story of how a city ran out of room for its dead, made a decision nobody was fully comfortable with, and accidentally created one of the strangest places on Earth. The problem: by the mid-1700s, Paris was one of the most populated cities in the world. It was also quietly rotting. The Saints Innocent Cemetery near Les Halles had been receiving bodies since the 10th century. 800 years of burials and a plot of land smaller than a city block, with no real system and no real limit. Mass graves were stacked on top of older mass graves. When one layer filled, workers dug another beneath it and started again. The ground around it had stopped behaving like ground. It had absorbed so much organic material over so many centuries that it was essentially biological matter compressed into the shape of soil. The water table in the surrounding streets was contaminated. Cellars and nearby buildings were filling with runoff that nobody wanted to think too hard about. People who drank from local wells were getting sick. In 1786, city inspectors opened a mass grave at the cemetery to take stock of what they were dealing with. The smell reached several streets away. The cemetery wall had partially collapsed, pushed outward by the pressure of everything inside it. The earth itself had become a hazard. The city closed Saints Innocents immediately. Then it had to face the question it had been avoiding for generations. 6 million people were buried in Paris's cemeteries. These cemeteries were destroying the city. The bodies had to go somewhere else. Where exactly was the part nobody had figured out yet? The ground beneath the ground. Paris had a second problem it had been largely ignoring, and the two problems were about to solve each other. For centuries, the city had been quarrying limestone from directly underneath itself. The stone that built the Notre Dame, the Louvre, and most of Paris's signature architecture came from the ground the city was standing on. Nobody at the time considered this a long-term structural concern. Several generations of nobody considering it, and then the streets started collapsing. The first recorded major collapse was in 1774. A section of road near the Rue d'Enfer simply dropped. More followed. The city commissioned a survey and discovered the scale of what centuries of quarrying had produced beneath it. Hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, caverns, chambers, a hollow network running under a third of the city with no complete map, no consistent reinforcement, and a living city sitting on top of it. The Inspection Générale des Carrières was created in 1777 specifically to deal with it. Their job was to survey the tunnels, shore up the ones at risk, and figure out what Paris was actually standing on. And then someone looked at the map of the tunnels and looked at the problem of 6 million bodies with nowhere to go and made a connection. The transfer. It began at night. The city made a deliberate decision to move remains after dark. Moving skeletal material through the streets of Paris in open carts past residents in daylight would cause panic. So the first processions went out after nightfall with torchlight, priests leading the way, carrying bones from the overflowing cemeteries down into the quarry tunnels beneath the Denfert-Rochereau district. The work ran for years, steadily, methodically, one cemetery at a time, and the workers who arranged the bones in the tunnels did something unexpected. They took care with it. The skulls were stacked in patterns, the long bones were sorted and laid in rows, and the geometric arrangements that visitors walk through today were built by people who were doing a grim job and decided it should look like something considered rather rather than something discarded. By 1788, the first transfers were complete. More followed as more cemeteries across Paris were closed across the following decades. By the time the work was substantially finished, the tunnels held remains from cemeteries that no longer existed, from people buried as far back as the 10th century in a space that had been working as a quarry less than a generation before. The scale of it only became strange when you sit with it. These were individual human beings with names and families and ordinary lives, pulled from the ground decades or centuries after burial, carried through dark city streets in the middle of the night, and restacked by strangers in a tunnel. The priests who blessed each procession understood what they were witnessing. Whether the paperwork caught up is another matter entirely. 6 million people, 240 kilometers of tunnels underneath a city that carried on above them. The official version and the other one. Napoleon opened the catacombs to the public in 1809. They have been a visitor attraction since then. The official route runs roughly 2 kilometers, drawing around 500,000 visitors a year, and ends with a gift shop. The remaining 238 kilometers are restricted. They have been explored continuously since the 1970s by people called cataphiles. There is an entire subterranean society down there with its own geography, its own named locations, and its own culture built over decades. Murals cover the walls and chambers that city authorities have never officially documented. Parties have been held underground, sometimes with hundreds of people, sometimes with generators and sound equipment carried down through access shafts that the city does not know about or has given up trying to seal. In 2004, police investigating unusual electrical activity traced it to an undocumented chamber beneath the 16th arrondissement. Inside, they found a fully equipped cinema, stone seating carved into the rock, a full-sized screen, a bar and restaurant set up with functioning equipment, a generator, a stock of films, and a note, left for whoever found it first. The note said, "Do not look for us." They never identified who built it. The tunnels flood unpredictably. The branching goes well beyond any available map. People get lost and stay lost often enough that Paris funds a dedicated police unit, called the cataphiles, whose only job is to enter the restricted sections and remove people who have gone down and cannot find the way back up. The cataphiles make arrests every year. They estimate they catch a small fraction of the total traffic. The numbers. The official catacombs contain the remains of 6 million people, relocated from cemeteries across Paris between 1786 and the mid-1800s. The tunnels they occupy run beneath roughly a third of central Paris, including under the Luxembourg Gardens, the Latin Quarter, and most of the left bank. Construction workers in Paris still break through into undocumented sections during renovation and foundation work. When that happens, work stops and the Inspection Générale des Carrières, the same department created in 1777, is called in. It has been operating continuously for 250 years, and the survey is still unfinished. The city does not have a complete picture of its own underground. It may never have one. The tunnels are older than most living institutions in France, and they were built to be used, then abandoned, then quietly repurposed for something nobody planned. A city faced an impossible problem and found the answer in a hole in the ground it had dug for itself. The dead are still down there. The bones are still arranged in careful patterns by hands that have been gone for 2 centuries. Above them, Paris goes about its day completely ordinary, completely unaware, 10 million people living on top of 6 million dead ones. And somewhere in these sections nobody has officially mapped, there are murals on the walls. Someone painted them. Someone thought the place was worth making beautiful. Most people walk past the entrance without stopping. Subscribe if you want to keep seeing what most people miss. We'll see you next time.